Hey, y'all, welcome to the Double G Show post UFC 294. Paul, I can really get into these afternoon UFC shows.
Love them. Absolutely love them.
I was, it was like 10 o'clock, and I was like, oh, I already got to shoot over to Dave's house. It's almost time for the show to start. And because the show ended with so many early stoppages, it was like barely over 2 hours, the main card. It was incredible.
Oh, it's awesome. I mean, yeah, I watched the prelims. So, I started at I think I started about 10:30 my time, which is 8:30 your time, and caught up before we got to the main card. So, it was a really good show, I thought. A lot of controversy, and I'm
There's
sure
stuff
we'll
to talk about for sure.
definitely. I've even got a couple of things on the prelims I can tell you about.
Okay, yeah. We'll wrap up with your thoughts on the prelims, which I did not watch.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I,
no,
but I
not
did
necessarily thoughts, just some cool stuff that happened that people might want to check out after the fact.
but I did also hear that something happened on the prelims that may have bled over into
Yeah.
one of the things we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Also, what's good about this is our good buddy Ryan Frederick. He has time to go do stuff, and he doesn't really have to worry about recording immediately. I believe he's going to be on
I
Wrestling
would
Observer Radio
assume
tonight.
he'll probably have a nap because I think
Yeah.
Dave will still not want to record till, I mean, imagine Dave's probably going out tonight, right? And then he'll
So
go out and yeah.
so I think that when I left him, he was ready to watch the Mystico and Rocky Romero match, and so he hadn't watched it yet. So he hadn't watched SmackDown, he hadn't watched Rampage. So I don't know if he's going to try and catch up with that stuff, but I do know that he has to watch Collision before he and Brian record. So that is on his docket. Okay, let's actually start with the big news in the main event here.
Mm-hmm.
If you've been closely following the UFC, you know that they lost their fight, and Alexander Volkanovski came in on short notice, and I hope he was paid very handsomely to take this fight. I assume so.
Oh yeah.
And it's a rematch with he and Islam Makhachev. The first fight was a very close fight. Makhachev got the decision. This second fight, which, I do wonder how people will perceive this, because Volkanovski did take this on short notice, but the way that Makhachev won this fight was probably good enough to where I don't know if there's going to be a clamor necessarily for a third fight in the near immediate future, but it was head kick, hammer fists, and this fight was over.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. There was, I mean, there was clamor for a rematch based on how the first fight went. And I think that they would have done it maybe 6 months from now, after he defended the featherweight title again, but they obviously needed short notice. I believe that this is the most that Alexander Volkanovski has ever been paid for a fight. So, him and Kamaru Usman, saved this show, and I'm sure they got paid handsomely to do so. But yeah, I agree. He'll go back down to featherweight, defend his title. I think if he's going to want to get another shot at Volkanovski, it's going to be moving up to the weight class and working his way up the rankings, not, another one of these title for title things. And with a full training camp, I don't think people will hold this against him. But that said, it's time to move on, and there's a lot of worthy contenders at lightweight. Charles Oliveira, who was
I was just about to ask you about that.
Yeah.
Is that the fight where do you think they're just going to run that immediately as soon as they can?
Well, he's injured, and Justin Gaethje really wants to fight, and Makhachev didn't take much damage, so depending on when they want to do it, if it's going to be in the next 4 months, I would say it's probably going to be Gaethje. Plus, I think Gaethje is a bigger fight.
Mm-hmm.
He's he just won the BMF championship. Oliveira is a former champion, but they've already fought, and Gaethje's a new fight. I don't think Islam really cares which one he fights. I don't think he thinks he'll have much of a problem beating either one of them. So I was listening to the post-game show with, or not necessarily the post-game show, but the, kind of the wrap-up they do at the end of the broadcast. And they seem to be leaning more towards Gaethje. So, yeah, but that may be just the injury.
Yeah, it could be. Totally.
Yeah.
So Volkanovski still has his title to defend.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
this is gonna gnaw at him, though, I believe, and I do wonder, as he's already 35 years old, so it's not like he's this really young guy, but a more natural move back up in weight is probably going to be in his near future here. But what is going to be next for him? Do you think?
Well, he before this fight was announced, they were just about to announce a featherweight title defense in January in Toronto against Ilya Topuria. So then we believe that that's still going to happen.
Interesting.
Because I mean, he did get knocked out, and they typically will give a suspension after a knockout, but 3 months from now is probably enough time. It didn't seem like he was interviewed post fight, and he seemed fine. I mean, it was a brutal knockout, but
Yeah.
it wasn't anything. I don't think, like, he didn't take sustained damage. It was more or less a couple really key blows, and and he was
Do they have a policy of how long you could come back from a knockout?
Theoretically, I mean, they announce suspensions,
Yeah.
but guys break them all the time. I mean, Ryan and I had a running thing on our show where Chase Sherman at heavyweight was getting knocked out constantly, and he kept getting these suspensions, and then they would just bring him back like a month later, and I think he was knocked out like 5 times in a row, and then finally they just stopped using him. And I was like, I even told Ryan off air, like, wow. I may have even said it on here, like, this may not end well for Chase Sherman.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I'm not talking his UFC career. Like, you can't take that much, punishment. And so, but I think 3 months is probably fine. And it's Toronto, it's different country, different commission, so they may not even uphold whatever they're doing here. So
I watched the fight with Dave and Dave's brother-in-law, Danny, who was a junior college wrestler.
Oh, yeah.
And he's a big MMA fan. He's like a interesting fan. He's like a hardcore casual. Like, he knows a lot about what's going on, but then there are some, like, I think he likes the underground. If you go back in the day of like the mid 2000s, like the MMA underground, like there was like a pride of that. And so I think he'll ask me if I saw this random Bellator fight, and I'm like, I don't know how I didn't even know that fight existed, but like, so he's like hardcore to that stuff. But then big picture stuff, it's stuff that he doesn't think is all that cool. He may not pay that close attention to it, but he's so fun to watch MMA with because he's such a conversational guy. And so, he's asking me, what do you think about Tony Ferguson? And I was like, the only thing I can think about when it comes to Tony Ferguson is, what is this dude's life going to be like in 20 years? Like, the head, the damage that these guys take, and then the pressure, and then the emotional and the mental stuff. It just seems like for some of these guys, the future it doesn't look fantastic based on their actions. And we saw with Israel Adesanya, who has had to deal with some disappointment of late after kind of being the creme de la creme in the company. If we go back through the closer to the pandemic time, like, he even is taking some time off. And I'm sure a lot of that is just, some of it is physical. These guys beat up their bodies all to hell, but it's also just the emotional and the mental capacity in like realizing, like, holy crap, I've actually lost some fights here.
Well, yeah, and then combine that with being out of the spotlight, the pressure of, being still, like, being a celebrity, but not really having that notoriety. A lot of them have problems with their relationships because they haven't been around much because they're so busy, like, training, and then all of a sudden they got to live a normal life. So there's a lot of adjustments that they make. And when you think back about the guys from that era, like, a lot of them now, like, they're, you can tell they were fighters. Like, like, you think of your Tito's and your Chuck Liddells, and like, GSP seemed to come out of it okay for the most part, but he got out early.
I saw a picture of him. He's still ripped, man.
Oh, yeah, he's supposed to be doing some grappling match on Fight Pass pretty soon, I think.
He said, and I think I read this in the Observer. It was either in the Observer or in one of Dave's updates. He was supposed to grapple against Nick Diaz, but both of them had to pull out because of injury.
Okay. So that's off now. Yeah, I was wondering about that because they did talk about that card on the show today, and they didn't mention his name. But then I thought, well, maybe it was just a different card. But okay, that makes sense.
The other,
but yeah, I mean, and Ferguson is, I mean, he's taken a lot of damage over the last 5 years.
The other thing that's fun about talking to Dave's brother-in-law, Danny, is he grew up around Dave, so he knows professional wrestling, but he doesn't really watch it anymore, but he still knows the guys. And he's asking me about Daniel Garcia's dance, and he doesn't like the dance, so he's like knowledgeable. But as we're watching some of these fights, he's like his gimmick today was to be like, Tony Khan, you got to bring this guy in, and he was talking
Johnny
about
Walker.
Some of these fighters. Tony Khan, you got to bring him in. And so I said, the guy who could actually probably do something in pro wrestling because of his personality is Adesanya. Like, Adesanya is that over the top with his personality and his confidence and his character and his trash talking that he could actually probably make the transition if he wanted to. But, there's not a lot of those guys in the UFC today where you look at him and you go, oh, the flair. Obviously Conor made his whole career on it, but he's too rich now to want to do pro wrestling. But I was thinking of who else would want to do it. I don't know if he would want to do it, but Adesanya would actually fit in.
He's a huge fan. Ryan told a story about how he was at a show. I think it was in Houston, and he was at the press conference, and Adesanya was at the mic, and then all of a sudden he just like started marking out, and he's like, "Is that Booker T?" and it was, and he was, and remember he did the Undertaker entrance for one of his fights. So yeah, I think he would probably do it. And now with the UFC and WWE being under the Endeavor umbrella, I mean, it makes it a lot more possible. There are a lot of guys, that probably like you are more of like a guy that watches the main card.
Yeah, I'm not digging deep like back in the day. For sure.
There's some guys on the undercards that, they definitely have the personality, and if they ever were to kind of get up the card, they would do. But I think like the guys right now at the tippy top are like pretty serious, and they don't really have
competitive.
Yeah, but I mean, Johnny Walker was on the main card today. He's a guy that that could do it. And then there was and there's a guy I'll talk about later when I tell you about the stuff to watch in the prelims. That, I mean, he's a total pro wrestling character on the undercard. So another guy. Spoiler alert for later, or something to keep you suspense to keep listening.
Okay, so the semi-main event was a fascinating fight. So this one also lost its original match because of Paulo Costa. Do we even what was the actual conversation about because he was in the crowd and he looked fine. I don't know. That doesn't mean anything, but like, what was the deal there?
The terminology is various surgeries. So like Paulo Costa is a bit of a flake. So, like you never really know with him, but he had elbow. The recent one was elbow surgery. And so, you wouldn't necessarily see that when he's sitting in the crowd. And I think there was another surgery that he had in July because he was actually originally scheduled to fight Ikram Aliskerov, who was also on this card.
Yes.
In July, and that fight was canceled. And then they booked him for this one with Khamzat. So, it's and they've had issues with him over the last year and a half, 2 years, just a lot. Anything you can think of, is a reason why he's missed fights. Like, it's pretty crazy. There's one point when he said he was taking a year off to get hair implants. Like,
that's awesome. That's an awesome excuse to not fight. I love it.
Yeah. And then there was another time when he claimed that he drank 2 bottles of wine the night before a fight, and that's why he was not 100%.
Oh my god.
Yeah, there's a guy that could do some pro wrestling, I think.
There you go. He's got the physique and everything too.
Yeah, and Usman, to take this fight, he was coming off 2 straight losses. He lost his title, he lost the rematch for the title, and here he's going to move up a weight class against one of the scariest guys in any weight class. 2 years ago he was the guy everyone was talking about, and then he's missed the last year or so. We're really not sure with Khamzat, and he hasn't really faced a ton of top competition. So this was, I mean, they got thrown, the old saying about what was Brock Lesnar saying, chicken salad, or turning chicken shit into chicken salad. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they turned whatever it was into like a great card here, at least on paper, because the original card was good. It was fine, but this was way better. And they did it on 11 days notice.
Yeah, no,
And here we got, a former champ in the co-main, and we got a champion versus champion in the main. So,
yeah,
pretty cool.
and a really, a champion taking this thing super seriously,
Yeah.
having an actual game plan and strategy to try and win this fight, which I don't think many people gave him that great of a chance to win. And he made it close. I was so impressed with Usman in this fight. So this was actually a 3-round fight here. So Chimaev and Usman, the whole thing about Usman, I think he'd only been taken down once in his career in the UFC in 18 fights or something like that.
Yep.
And like pretty early in the first round, he got taken down. And it's not like it was an easy takedown, but you were like, okay, like this was a message from Chimaev in this fight. And Usman's fighting, he's fighting. Chimaev gets on his back. He's trying to flatten him out, can't flatten him out. Usman's on his knees. And then he gets to his feet and he tries to drive Chimaev's head into the mat to break out of the hooks and everything. And unfortunately, he just could not shake this guy. He had to backpack this guy for the entire round. And at this point, I'm like, oh, this is not going to be great, because Usman's got to be so tired from this first round that he's just going to be easy pickings for Chimaev in the second round. And that is not what happened. But give me your thoughts on this first round.
Everything you said is correct. What came out later, and I'm not sure if you've heard yet, Chimaev says he broke his hand.
Oh, I did see something about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is why, the second and third didn't go the same. But I mean, the first round, yeah, I mean, it looked like he was going to submit him. There's a couple times when he was laying in like hard shots, and and the ref was, at one point it looked like the ref was about to stop it. And then he, Usman kind of moved his head, and he was getting away. So he kind of backed off a bit. Ref was, I think it was Jason Herzog, and he's one of the best ones they have. So, he's not going to stop a fight early. And yeah, it was, I mean, this was, I made the comment that this was exactly what Colby Covington said he was going to do to Kamaru Usman, but he never was able to. I mean, they had a couple great fights, but what ended up happening in those fights was, they just had basically stand-up wars, and Usman just wore him down eventually. But here it looked like it was just going to be 15 minutes of Khamzat ragdolling him. But then, when they came out for the second, you mentioned that it looked like Usman was tired, and then what ended up happening was it was Khamzat.
Yeah.
Got that. I mean, what it appeared anyways was that it appeared that he gassed himself out trying to go for that finish. And it was a 10-8 first round. I mean, I scored it that way. All three judges did. Most scores I saw, few people gave it a 10-9 because they said, well, he didn't do enough damage. But if you're using the strict criteria, three Ds: duration, damage, and dominance. Mm-hmm. And he had duration and he had dominance. So it was a clear 10-8. And so if you give it a 10-8, now Usman's basically fighting for a draw. Right. And and the way it went, one of the judges did score it a draw, because that third round was super close. Like, I gave it to Chimaev, but if you gave it to Usman, I wasn't going to argue with you too hard.
And like that was the coin flip, right? You were either going to get a decision victory for Chimaev, or you were going to get a draw, and those were all the scorecards had, either one of those two. Now, the part where the style of this fight was so fascinating, because the way Usman gets back into this fight is on his feet, and his corner is saying, you just got to push this guy back. Every time you move forward, he moves back. And so he started doing that. And then in the third round, he's having some success, and it gets in close, and then he does get taken down at the end there, and that may have cinched it in the eyes of the judges. But I was just so impressed, because, the thing about MMA, and it is hard, in which is why it's really hard for these guys to have a long, sustained career. I'm sure the days of a George St. Pierre just dominating the divisions are over, because it is so competitive. You look at someone like Usman, I don't even feel like he's an old UFC guy. right? He's been a champion, but to me, it doesn't feel like he's been around necessarily forever. But if you look at his last 2 fights, you could make the assumption that, his better days may be behind him rather than in front of him. And so I'm going into this fight just hoping that I don't see this guy get blitzed, because it's just a sad thing for me to see somebody who was once great all of a sudden realize that they are no longer great. So I was so happy to see that he still has that thing that made him a champion in the tank. And now for Chimaev, he's gonna go to the next level. Is he gonna get the next shot? Is that where we're going here?
That's Dana said before the fight that the winner would get a middleweight title shot. So again, that was more incentive for Usman to take the fight on short notice, because he wasn't going to get a rematch at 170. After losing 2 straight fights to Leon Edwards. So for him, this was a quick ticket to get to the middleweight title. And Dana said after the fight, he was really impressed with Usman. He thanked him in the cage afterwards for taking the fight. And basically in the post-fight press conference, Dana said, it's up to Kamaru what he wants to do. If he wants to go down to 170, he can go down to 170. If he wants to stay at 185, he can go to 185. And I don't think they'll hold this against him. Like if he wins a couple fights against top guys, I could see him getting into that title mix as well. But Khamzat is going to get the title shot at Strickland. Most people look at Sean Strickland as a beatable champion. So, but Strickland's beat a lot of guys he wasn't supposed to beat, including Adesanya. So it's a super intriguing fight because Khamzat is really not that experienced at 185.
No.
You talked about Kamaru Usman, not being around a long time, and he started 8 years ago. So you're not wrong. I mean, 8 years
doesn't feel like it.
No.
Like, MMA years are so different for me these days than they were when I first started watching.
Well, when you think about it, like, I mean, you think 2015, it doesn't even seem that long ago, right? But I mean, Khamzat started in the pandemic, I think.
Yeah.
Or it was like, like he had that one stretch there where he fought twice in 8 days, and and then he, I think he fought 5 times in something like 6 months, and then he didn't fight again for a year. So, I think he's literally been in UFC for like 2.5 years or something. I could be wrong on that. I don't have his record in front of me, but and he's already going to be fighting for a title. So, but again, these guys too, now it's taking them longer to get to the UFC. You used to see guys come in 23, 24 years old. Now, they're 28, 29. They do bring some young people in, but what it
like
tends
that
to
kid,
happen,
what's the kid's name?
Raul Rosas Jr.
Yeah.
But see, those guys
baby.
flame out.
Yeah.
Because they're in too early, because it's UFC so weird, because like we talk about back in the day, and back when Chuck and Tito and Randy Couture and all that, GSP, Matt Hughes, like it feels like it was so much bigger back then, but it's actually like way bigger now. But it's to a like, it's just not as like the people that are watching it aren't talking about it as much. I don't know what it is.
UFC, the company, MMA, people just call it UFC because they're the biggest company. The company is much bigger, and outside of Conor McGregor and maybe John Jones, the star power of the singular fighters seems a lot less than Chuck and Randy and Brock Lesnar in that era. But the quality of the fighting has never been better. It's ridiculous how skilled these guys are, and these women.
Kind of like wrestling in that way, like WWE is, never made more money, but like the guys in the company, outside of like Roman Reigns, are like the guy, nobody on the street knows who they are. Like, and back in the day, it's like, Hulk Hogan, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, JYD, like you knew all of them.
Mm-hmm.
But so it's different. But for people like me that watch all the shows and literally all the shows and all the fights, it's huge, and they're selling out everywhere. They're about to sign like a $2 billion a year TV deal, we think.
You think so?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Did you listen to Wrestling Observer Radio last night?
Not yet.
Okay. Because Dave and
but I mean, he's been talking about,
Dave and I
think
had
UFC is
a big
safe
conversation about the timing of these deals, and with the NBA deal kind of being the one that everybody is circling, because Adam Silver says that they're going to get triple, and people are looking at the environment or the market and going like, okay, where's the triple coming from? Now, if it comes from an Apple or an Amazon, you're giving up some power there because they are
Yeah.
going to want some control of whatever the product that they are going to sell. So it's going to be interesting. ESPN is kind of, moving away from certain things and leaning into Pat McAfee. And so I'm very interested. ESPN said that they don't want as much NBA product as they've had. So that doesn't sound like a great sign, but maybe having less of the NBA product means we want the UFC stuff. And, that's a little bit more, it can't be more important, but it is important.
I think it's a big part of ESPN Plus.
But I think they're moving away from it. I think
Oh, are they?
ESPN
Okay.
well, so not in the next couple years, but
Yeah.
the whole conversation with ESPN is their direct consumer product.
Oh, okay.
They're going to go over the top with ESPN to where people will still be able to get it if they want cable, but they'll also be able to get the full ESPN experience through whatever the app is. And so I don't think you can have an over the top ESPN Plus and an over the top ESPN. I think they're just going to sort of combine. So
They do that in Canada.
well, that actually might be better for the UFC, right? Is that this thing goes over the top. UFC has a younger fan base, so maybe it does become more valuable even with an over the top product. But they're going to take their hits in this transition. Everybody is, and who knows how long it will take for the audience to get 100% into streaming to where the cable is nothing anymore, and then it's all about streaming. That does not seem like it is near. It seems like it is still, many, many, many years away.
They picked up on the move to pay-per-view streaming pretty quick, which actually surprised me. I think it was because they had
it's a pretty brilliant deal if you think back. They were really smart about how they did that, I think.
Yeah, and having a Conor fight as like one of the first big ones kind of made it that, you don't know about this, well, you better figure it out quick because we got a big fight, and if you want to watch it, you got to sign up for this service. So
I'm going to share this comment mostly because I want to shout out my guy Big Leo, who mostly follows the stuff that I do on BSPN. But he said he shouldn't have taken the fight on short notice. But I think Paul explained why it was actually fruitful for Usman to take the fight, because a win, which was probably less than 50% in most people's eyes for him to actually win this fight, would have catapulted him into a title shot. And because of how thankful Dana White was, I'm sure he made a lot of money for taking this fight as well.
Yeah, and it also he kind of made a good showing for himself as well.
Yeah.
So I think he came out of the fight probably stronger in people's eyes than he went going in.
In some instances also, it's sort of like you're kind of proving to yourself, because I'm sure he wants to stay at 170 for as long as possible. Oh, the guys are bigger, they're going to hit harder. But this fight may have convinced him, like, this transition may not be as bad as maybe I could possibly think it was before taking this fight.
There's one other thing Daniel Cormier mentioned in the post-fight stuff that Kamaru Usman, when he was walking out of the cage, Daniel says, "Good job," and he was like shaking his head, and he's like, "They offered me 5 rounds." He said, "I should have taken it."
Yeah.
And and he said, "But I just thought, you know what, I might have a better chance of 15 minutes." He said, "I was wrong." He said, because he thinks that if it would have gone 25, he would have won. So
yeah, that's very interesting in hindsight.
Yeah, and they've done that before. Recently in the last couple of years, they've done some co-main event 5-round fights, which they'd never done before. Like if it's not for a title. So just thought that was interesting.
All right, Johnny Walker, Magomed Ankalaev. This poor fight. I think we have a slight difference in opinion on maybe what the right thing was. I think so I'll explain what happened, and then we can kind of talk about the controversy here. So Johnny Walker comes out in his entrance, and he's pop locking. This dude is like busting. He's like, if anyone has seen Breakin', like he's like Turbo and Ozone, just pop locking on his way. And I was like, I love this guy. He's not going to win, but I kind of hope he's going to win. And so the fight starts. Ankalaev has him against the cage, and Walker has a knee down, and then Ankalaev hits him with a knee while the knee is down, and he hits him like really flush. And the idea is you don't need to defend yourself from strikes or from that position. And so you kind of lay off a little bit, and then the strike comes and you're not expecting it. And it can be very brutal, which is why it is a penalty. And so Walker looks pretty dinged to me, but the conversation on Twitter was that he just kind of always looks like that. I don't know if that's a good argument against what I saw, but there were some jokes in there at his expense, but for the idea that maybe he wasn't as hurt as I thought he was. And so the referee pauses the fight. The doctor comes in and they start asking him questions. I can't hear based on the mic about what they asked, but I think Kevin Iole tweeted that they asked him what country they were in, and either the doctor didn't get a good answer or he didn't answer. But you said that you thought you heard him actually give the correct answer.
Not the correct answer. That's the thing. I think when he said, what country are you in? I thought I heard him say Abu Dhabi. And he said, yeah, we're in Abu Dhabi, but what country is it? And then he just kind of looked at him, and it's like United Arab Emirates. Like, I'm not sure I would have known that.
No. I would have known. I would have known Abu Dhabi immediately, but I would have had to do some math in my head.
So what he answered was, he said, well, we're in the desert. Okay. And then they asked him what round it was, and then he just kind of looked at him. Now you got to remember too, Johnny Walker is, English is a second language. Maybe he didn't quite understand what he was being asked. Normally in this situation, they would bring in a translator. I would also say normally in this situation, and again, we see this all the time, like guys getting kneed, when they're down, probably happens. There's certain cards it tends to happen on more often, but I would say on average, probably like twice a month that we'll see it. And 90% of the time, the ref will just talk to them. He'll stop the fight. He'll wait till the fighters, seems clear-headed, and then he'll just start the fight again. And he may or may not dock a point. In this case, the referee, I just want to check who the ref was. That's what I thought. It was Dan Moavetti, who is not an experienced ref. I shouldn't say that. He's not a guy that you'll see on a lot of UFC shows. He normally only shows up on these Abu Dhabi cards. I'm sure he refs fights that are there as well, but he's not like one of the main guys. And so for him to immediately call for a doctor was unusual in itself. And then this doctor, as we'll get into a little bit later, like this.
Well, no, why don't you explain it now? Because I didn't watch it, but when the doctor came in, the scuttlebutt on Twitter was, this is bad. Like, we don't want this guy to come in.
Not just on Twitter. Daniel Cormier was laughing. This is the same doctor. Like, just going on and on.
I did hear
and
that.
if you didn't watch the prelims, like, you didn't know. So earlier on, Javid Basharat and Victor Henry were fighting, and this was kind of similar in the sense that Basharat was a huge favorite and he was dominating the fight. And and it was in the first, I believe it was the first round or second round. Sorry, it's early. Yeah, he dominated the first round, easily won the first round. They come up for the second round, and he gives him a kick straight up the middle. And literally the way Daniel Cormier described it, his toes were like in the guy's butt, practically. Like that's how far. So, but
wait, is this a UFC fight or is this an AEW finish? What are we doing
was
here?
A UFC fight.
Okay.
So he just nails him, and the way he dropped, like, it was like kind of a delayed reaction where he just stood there and then he just collapsed, and then you're like, oh no, like this was bad. So he's down. And he's like just rolling around on the ground. They get him to the corner. He's still like down. He's in pain. They bring in this doctor. This doctor's telling him, and using these words, he says, that was a clean hit. And he's like, no, he hit me in the balls. And the doctor says, no, he did not hit you in the balls. That was a clean shot. But he used the word balls. He used the word balls over and over again.
So he used the medical term.
Yeah, no, he said balls. And that's why Twitter was calling him the balls doctor.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
And then he essentially, like, and we didn't even know, like, what are they going to, are they just going to restart the fight? Or are they going to call it? They even thought they might just give the fight to Basharat because the doctor said it was a clean shot, but they ended up, they ruled it a no contest, just like in this one, and they called it an unintentional blow. In this case, it probably was. I mean, nobody's like kicking to try to hit the guy in the balls. Like, it just sometimes they move a little bit and it just goes straight up the middle. In this case, in this fight that we were talking about here with with Johnny Walker and Magomed Ankalaev, like that was, they called it an accidental blow. I mean, it wasn't an accidental blow. He deliberately hit him. He just didn't realize he was down. So, I mean, I guess to say it was an accidental foul is probably true, but it definitely wasn't an accidental blow.
At that early in the fight, he's not looking to break the rules. I don't think he probably felt like he was in command of the situation, and
he might have thought he wasn't down, because I think there's a misunderstanding about the rules, because they changed them at one point, and it was as long as you had one hand down, you were a down fighter. But then they changed it to two hands down, but it's always knees down, you're down.
Yeah.
And so I think there's like a misconception that if it's 2 out of 3 limbs, like some fighters, it's hard for these guys. They're in the middle of a fight to remember exactly what the rules are. Like you're just trying to win a fight, and you're throwing strikes. But I mean, this was a pretty blatant illegal blow. Like, and certainly I wouldn't have expected a DQ. What I would have expected was that Johnny Walker would have been given enough time to recover.
Okay, this is the crux, I think, of the situation now. Yeah. So, doctor comes in, and the referee asks the doctor, "Can he fight?" And then the doctor says no, and the referee was kind of surprised. He almost like made him verify that was the decision, and so the referee waves his hands like to wave off the fight, which is the universal sign that this thing is over, and no reaction from Johnny Walker.
Yeah.
Then, I don't know, it was 10 seconds later, Johnny Walker's trying to press forward because all of a sudden there's like the teams are in the ring now or in the cage. And so he's trying to press forward as if, we're supposed to be fighting. I don't know if he was confused. I don't know if he was maybe concussed. Like, I think Dana White has said the doctor is new working with us. We're going to make it, we'll rematch the fight or whatever. But I do think there's still a possibility that Johnny Walker may not have been all there. Now, what you just said, which is you give the guy 5 minutes. Why did the referee or the doctor call this thing off so quickly? Or why did the referee ask the doctor before this 5-minute period? That is the part that is confusing to me, because I think, I don't know if you're dinged. I don't know if 5 minutes really means much, but the fact that he went so quickly and didn't use this time, I'm assuming that has something to do with what Dana was saying, that he just is kind of a new guy. But yeah, the thing that was weird to me was Walker not reacting at all to the waving off the fight, and then sort of coming to some realization that the fight was actually over, when I thought he should have realized that with that waving it off. But the whole thing was a bunch of confusion. He actually was kept pressing forward to the point of where Ankalaev was like, "You're getting a little too close, dude." Like, I'm about to throw this punch, so you better watch out. That was a weird way to end too. I don't know if any of those guys actually talked after the fact.
I don't think so. It was crazy because there's like 18 guys in the cage, and they're like trying to separate these guys, and Walker's moving forward, and he's going after the doctor, he's going after the ref.
Two hands shoved the ref in the chest.
Yeah. And you thought, man, this is going to break down. And then all of a sudden, Dana walks in the middle of all these people, and he looks at Walker and he says, "Get over there." And he just does. Like, it's like he doesn't care about any of these 18 guys, but Dana, I'm not I'm not getting in Dana's fate. Yeah,
he's Vince, man.
And then Dana said to him at some point, "Don't worry, we'll take care of it." So I almost thought too that he might have been mad because it was a no contest and he wasn't going to get his win bonus. That's a very reasonable thing to think as well. And so when Dana says, "Well, we'll take care of it," maybe that means he's just going to give both these guys their win bonus and just redo the fight, because it sucks. I mean, you do a whole training camp, you get all pumped up for this fight, you do a weight cut, and then you replenish, and then 3 minutes in, the fight's over and we don't have a decision. I mean, that really sucks. As much as it sucks for us fans, it really sucks for those fighters.
And here's why I think the first fight specifically just seemed like an overmatched, and we'll get to that in a second. And the second fight was great action, but also ended very quickly. So I'm sure that, this fight was like, okay, this is going to be actually competitive here. And I'm not sure if it was actually going to be all that competitive, but to have that being taken away with this like controversy, I'm sure it kind of bummed Dana out. But okay, let's get to the fight that was right before this. which was someone you mentioned already, Ikram Aliskerov against Warley Alves. It's funny. When I was watching this fight, I remember Warley. Was it from one of the Ultimate Fighters? Was it Chael and Vanderlei where we first saw Warley?
It was Tough Brazil, so I don't even think it aired here.
Okay.
But I think he was on the Ronda Rousey, like one of the pay-per-views that Ronda Rousey did. I think that's where he won his Ultimate Fighter title.
And so watching the fight, and Dave's brother-in-law mentioned something about Warley because I think his coach is Pedro Hizzo. And, and then Dave just randomly says something about, yeah, I thought Warley was a pretty good prospect, and then, they brought in the drug testing, and then he hasn't been. It's like an assumption that had something to do with Warley, and I was like, yeah, now that you mentioned that, I was like, yeah, he looks a little different. So,
oh, you know what? You're right. It was Sonnen and Juan Vanderlei.
Yeah, because I remember we had to sort of find a way. Did we watch it through Fight Pass or something?
I didn't watch it. Like, that's the thing. But yeah, you're probably right. Like, because it didn't air on like ESPN or FS1 or whoever their partner was at the time.
Yeah, I remember. I think it was like through Fight Pass you had to watch that season, and that season was ridiculous because Vanderlei and Chael were like coming to blows like every other episode. So Alves comes in and throws a nice leg kick, and I was like, oh, like, because the way that Aliskerov like kind of he no sold it, but I was like, no way, this dude is feeling it. And then all of a sudden he throws a jab, almost knocks Alves down with the jab, and you're like, uh-oh, okay, it's coming. And then he throws the prettiest jumping knee maybe that I've ever seen, lands it flush, throws. I'm not even sure the punches landed all that well, but it may have been just a delayed reaction from the knee. And he follows up some punches against the cage, and Alves is just out in the fight.
He just kind of slumped.
Yeah.
And I think the ref, like, he saw that first knee and he was like, or that first jab, and I think he almost looked like he was getting ready to stop it. And then he does the knee, and then the ref's like right there. And then like he kind of like stayed up against the cage for a second, had his hands up. So you're like, okay, we'll let him go a little bit. And then he landed a couple more punches.
Yes, and I wasn't even convinced that those punches, because Cormier was trying to say that the punch was what knocked him out, and he's describing it, and he's like going, and then he throws the punches, and I was like, I don't think that really landed that much.
I think he was down.
Yeah, I think he was out. I think the knee is what actually put him out. But by the way, what did you think? They did Cormier dirty on this show. He had to describe or hype up the John Jones and Stipe fight. And so he's hyping up this fight all while they're playing the video of Stipe kicking his ass. That was so mean.
Yeah. Wow.
That was a rib, man.
Yeah, no, they're trolling him.
Yeah.
Did you get the I know you did a preview of this. Did you get Ryan's best bet? Because he called this. He called
you sent it to me, and I told Dave as the fight started, I said, Ryan thinks that this is going to end in knockout. And then when I said that, it ended in knockout.
Yeah, no, he's pretty good at these. He was only 1 for 3 on ours, and I was 2 for 3 on mine. So between the two of us, when you go 500 on prop bets, you're making money. Mm-hmm. And we've actually every single week we've been profitable on these. So yeah, good call by Ryan there. Great. Like, this guy looks scary. Like, he's a guy that he's going to be matched up with a top 10, top 15 guy next. I mean, he could be, if Usman stays at 185, that's a match we could see probably in like a year. And if I'm Usman, I don't want to fight him.
All right. This is where my pronunciation is going to go all to hell. So the opener on the main card was Gafurov versus, is it Syed Nurmagomedov? Saeed. Okay.
Yeah.
I was close enough.
Yeah.
Now this fight, I literally was typing the names of these guys on the website as I was writing about it, and the fight was over.
Yeah. Minute 13 seconds.
Quickly put him in a guillotine choke. He taps pretty quickly, and Nurmagomedov even lets the choke go before the referee can get in to stop it. He's just like, no, this guy's done. I'm just letting it go. And I think the guy was very thankful that he let the choke go, but very, very easy win. And, you mentioned about Alaskarov being the real deal. How much of a real deal is Nurmagomedov?
Hard to say. He's not a guy, that he's not ranked. He's not a guy that we really talk about. Bantamweight is a really, really loaded division. He needed this win. He was coming off a loss to Jonathan Martinez, who is a guy that's rising up the rankings. He kind of needed this. This was basically a fight. I think they do these all the time, like a showcase fight. Muin Gafarov he kind of had some hype when he came into UFC, but he has not looked good at all. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets cut after this. But it's a good win for Nurmagomedov. There's a lot of fighters, whose names end in V on this show, and he was one of them. Yeah, like there is, they had, but Gafarov, I think, might have been the crowd favorite here. So, but it was, this was a good, nice showcase win for Saeed. Gets kind of back on track. They'll put him in with a guy probably like hovering around the top 15 next, and see what they got with him. But I don't think he's not a guy that you necessarily need to pay a lot of attention to yet.
All right, what was going on the prelims and such?
All right, so I'm not going to go through every single fight, but I'll just tell you a couple of the highlights. In the opener, a guy that came in with a lot of hype, Shara Magomedov. He was 11-0 coming in, and he is fighting Bruno Silva, who is a tough middleweight, and a lot of power, not really known for his wrestling. So Magomedov starts this fight, and he's throwing these leg kicks that sound like gunshots. Like, it's unbelievable. Like, I've never heard leg kicks that sound like this. Within 2 minutes, Silva's leg is red.
Oof.
And at that point, Silva just decides to take him down. And Silva, like I said, is not a wrestler, but this was the only chance he had. And so he took him down near the end of the first round to just kind of stop taking that damage. He took a lot of damage, clearly lost the first. The second kind of started the same, and then Silva took him down a little bit earlier. He didn't do any damage. Magomedov was landing a lot of stuff from the bottom, and I thought, it could have gone either way. The commentators were saying, Silva may have won. I thought it was pretty clear Magomedov won. Third round, Silva took him down right away because he wants no part of these leg kicks. And he kept him down almost the whole round, but Magomedov was doing stuff on the bottom, and then he got up at one point, and whenever they were on the feet, he was dominating. And they gave him all 3 rounds, but he's got a crazy look. He's a redhead with a big beard and long hair. This guy is a guy to keep an eye on. I'll just say that. Yeah. The other one I wanted to talk about, I mentioned the Victor Henry thing. Mike Breeden. So he's fighting Anshul Jubli. And Anshul Jubli is a guy, a lot of hype, undefeated fighter. He was on road to UFC, and he won a contract, I think it was late last year. So this is his first official UFC fight. And he's pretty much dominating Mike Breeden for the first 2 rounds. And just on the feet, not like just whitewashing him or anything, but, pretty clearly won the first 2 rounds. And Mike Breeden's corner tells him he needs a finish. You're going to have to get a finish. Mike Breeden comes out for the 3rd round, and he starts barking at this dude, literally barking, just roof, roof. He's going full DMX, just, roof, roof, right in his face. He's posing, he's doing this, and then like Jubilee's just looking at him like, what is this guy? And then every time he just look at him with this look on his face, like, what have I gotten myself into? He get nailed with a combination. And this just kept going and going. He's like sitting in his face, USA, USA, like boom, boom, boom. And then like Jubilee just had no idea what to do. And then eventually he gets knocked out like 3 minutes into the round. It was the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen. Jeez. I would recommend, if you've got Fight Pass, just go watch the 3rd round. It was unbelievable. And yeah, those are the 2 highlights of, this is why I watched the prelims.
Yeah.
I will just say, because this Mike Breeden cat is insane. He had lost his first 4 UFC fights, so he needed a win in the worst way. And he made an impression, I will say. And I definitely want to see him again.
All right. I want to ask you one question about UFC 295, which is actually in 3 weeks. So we don't get the full month to wait.
Huge show.
But I want to also make notice that you and Ryan will be back on Wednesday with In the Clinch.
Yep.
And
we'll do a full review.
All the fights, get Ryan's thoughts on stuff. and then get us all ready over the next few weeks for 295. I asked this to Dave as we were watching. We saw the little highlight video of John Jones and Stipe. Madison Square Garden should be a giant show. Is Stipe going to be competitive, or is this a paycheck fight?
I lean more towards the latter. But I mean, you never know with Stipe. Like he's probably the best heavyweight of all time, and that's probably why John Jones wants this fight, because he wants to be the best heavyweight of all time. And that's going to be the narrative. But I mean, if Stipe shows up and it's just clearly like a paycheck fight, and he maybe gets finished in the second round or something like that, I don't necessarily think that takes away from everything that Stipe did in his prime.
Yeah.
I think he was probably just as well to be retired. Took them a long time to make this fight. We've been talking about this for it feels like a year and a half, ever since John Jones came back. So, it's Stipe. He's a champion, and I mean, he's not as old as you probably think he is. Well, no, he's 41. Geez. But in terms of fighting years, I don't think he's as old, because, he kind of came to prominence, and I'd say maybe around 2012, 2013, and it feels like he's been gone for a couple of years. So it's really kind of like a 7-8 year window where he was like dominant. It's a huge fight. Could be the last fight of the career for both guys. I mean, that's kind of the scuttlebutt going around. There's, John Jones, they may try to incentivize him to fight again after this. There's a couple, there's some great heavyweight prospects, but does John Jones really want to fight prospects,
Okay, well, we talked about this when we were talking about the difference in the UFC today. Can John Jones live his life outside of the spotlight? I think that's the thing that keeps him fighting, is just he likes being recognized. He likes being well known. He knows that he's still, even if his athletic prime might be slightly behind him, he knows he's just so much better technically than everybody else that he could win by that way. I don't know if I would believe that he would retire.
I don't know enough to know. I just, to me, I guess I'm kind of leaning towards the way you're thinking, that I'll believe it when I see it. But there's a lot of people talking, and Ryan keeps saying it, and Ryan knows his stuff, and Ryan, knows some real insiders. So if he's saying it, it's, there's probably some truth to it. The only thing is, they are dangling in front of him. They're talking about maybe doing a stadium show in London, and Tom Aspinall is a big contender, so they could sell out that stadium, for a John Jones fight. And that's something he's never done. He's never headlined a stadium show. So for him, that would be big money and checking something off of a box, for him. So there's that. And then, there's also, I always forget the name of the guy. There's a Russian, Sergey Spivak, I think is his name, or I might have that wrong. There's two big Russian prospects. There's one Russian prospect that's just been mowing through everybody. And if he keeps doing it, I could see, maybe Jones wanting to fight him as well. But every time John Jones fights, he's putting his legacy on the line too. So there's that. And, there's probably a lot of other ways for John Jones to make money. Probably not the kind of money he's making here, but,
this PFL contract that Ngannou signed, it's pretty ironclad here. We can't get out of this.
Oh, well, yeah, it is, and they got a lot of seed money. I don't think they're gonna have any problem paying him, and for him, he's gonna make all that money to fight Tyson Fury. He'll make more money for that one fight than he probably made his whole UFC career.
I know that's gonna be ridiculous. So much so that Tyson Fury has already signed to fight Alexander Usyk 2 months after this fight with Fury.
Well, you're the boxing guy. I gotta imagine, he's got no chance, right?
He hits
0.
really hard, which is to his benefit, but I imagine Fury is just going to put him on his back and carry him for 6, 7, 8 rounds, and maybe hope that there's a referee who sees Ngannou getting hit a little bit too much and maybe stops it, sort of like the Floyd versus Conor fight, where people are like, Conor wasn't even in that much danger. I was like, yeah, but Conor keeps getting hit.
Floyd gave a couple rounds too.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, whereas I don't know, Ngannou, when you say he hits hard, but it's a different kind.
It's a different kind of hitting hard, for sure.
Yeah. because you got the gloves.
Fury's not going to be there for this big long punch. He's going to be way out of the way. He's going to see it coming.
Yeah.
But it's not going to. What if Ngannou just pulls a Dylan Dennis and just starts shooting on him, trying to put him in a guillotine?
I don't think either one of those guys is real terribly interested in having a real fight. They're just there to make some money.
But this is part of the problem, right? And this is why I asked you about Stipe, which is, do UFC fans know that Stipe and John Jones is more show than fight? Do they expect it to be a great fight? Because I don't expect it to be a great fight, but there's just that small possibility that Stipe can, maybe go back into the hands of time and come out, and maybe he's just secretly just a beast in the gym right now. But everything tells me that this is a paycheck fight for him. Now, he's a prideful dude. He doesn't want to go out, just looking terrible. But if this fight ends like tonight's fight with Volkanovski and, going out the way that he did, it kind of feels like, okay, you're signing these fights, and I appreciate you signing these, making sure the main event, stays put and stuff, but they're not super competitive, and that I just don't like that style of booking. And one thing the UFC has been great with in its history, and what makes it different from boxing, is the competitiveness of these big fights is usually there. So that's just a small worry for me.
Yeah.
I still want to watch it. I'm still going to watch it. I'll be there.
I think this is probably like their version of Hulk Hogan and the Rock.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the former champion against the current guy, and it's not going to be a great match, but you just want to see these two guys in there against each other. And there's two kinds of fights. You got the best against best, and you've got this. And I think originally the idea for this pay-per-view was, tonight's pay-per-view was, best against best. You got Oliveira, who, he lost the first fight, but long time had a long winning streak before he lost to Makhachev. And you got Makhachev, who's a pound for pound best fighter in the world, going against each other. Yeah, that's a great fight. And the same division, everything. He gets injured, so now we're scrambling. We got to have a fight. What's going to appeal to people? Let's do champion versus champion. Even though we probably know it's not going to be all that competitive, on short notice. But they did a good job hyping it to where some experts were saying, we have our own panel and Fight Game, and a lot of people picked Volkanovski.
Yeah, so, I was surprised to see that.
Yeah, the hype worked. Ryan, predicted Volkanovski, and he almost had me convinced, but I did. I did pick Makhachev because I just thought, he's just too good.
Yeah.
And I'm going to continue to pick Makhachev until he loses, and I suspect he's going to be like Khabib and just keep fighting, and then one day just say, yeah, I'm done. And then maybe there'll be another guy with a V in his last name that decides to be the lightweight champion.
Save your money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they do well.
All right. So like I mentioned, you and Ryan will be back on the Patreon. You can see if you're watching on video, you can see the link there at the bottom. If not, if you are listening to this, you're already listening to it through the Patreon. So you can hear them and do their big recap of this show. And then also you're going to hear Paul and see Paul, if you are into wrestling, the Dynamite show Wednesday night, 20 minutes after AEW Dynamite. The East Coast version is done. He and Jeff Hawkins will be live talking about that show, and then other stuff about AEW. By the way, did you see Mystico and Rocky Romero yet?
Not yet. I will try to get to that tonight. I'm really looking forward to that one.
Okay, my feedback, I'm not spoiling anything. My feedback is, didn't need to be 2 out of 3 falls. Let's just go one fall.
Okay. Well, those, they never do. But did it, I mean, do you ever watch the CMLL stuff?
The only time I've ever watched any real CMLL is when we had Rocky on, and I was like, I should probably see if I know what match.
What I'm watching for is just to know whether or not it looks and feels like a CMLL match, and that's kind of what I'm looking. I'm not really, I don't really care about the quality.
So there, you tell me if this is a genuine CMLL. There's a referee.
Yeah,
he was twice the size of both of those dudes.
Wow. Yeah,
he was wearing a shirt that was probably 2 sizes too small. It's on the husky side, and I think in the beginning of this match, people could not take their eyes off of him.
You're
versus,
selling me. You're selling me on this.
so
Yeah.
I thought that
I
was
think
very interesting.
I think there's a reason they put this show on Friday rather than Wednesday, because I think the idea was to do the CMLL Friday night experience.
Yeah,
And
makes sense.
that's what I'm kind of watching for. So I'm looking forward to it, and Collision tonight and all this stuff. But
Yeah, they
I got my
kicked it.
MMA fix in.
Yeah, no, it was great. I love these afternoon shows. But they kicked it into gear in the third fall, and then you got to see the classic Mystico stuff that you want to see.
Awesome. Yeah.
All righty.
I love Mystico.
We are done here. Thanks, Paul, for hanging out, and I'm glad we were able to do this because, as you know, the one thing that I wish I could do is watch more UFC than I get a chance to. So whenever I can, I want to watch it and I want to talk about it. So thanks for being here.
Awesome.
For Paul, I am Double G. We will see you when we see you. Peace out.